new regulations are probably going to add a further 10% to the already 7 to 10% that has been added as a result of Brexit and the new regulations.
It seems we had to have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister to prove to the country that he is a liar. Some people are still struggling to actually deal with that fact, but he lied from the beginning about Brexit. He lied to everybody about everything. And now reality is playing out. Brexit reality is delivering what those who are labelled as Project Fear predicted. And Brexit will only continue to get worse until Britain faces reality and undoes it.
Thank you.
The one massive issue which a lot of the news reports are missing out is that this year in particular, there's going to be an awful lot less British food. So the fact that the government are deciding to bring in these checks now is almost certainly going to ensure a food crisis, and we're likely to see hyperinflation happening unless somebody does something, because we have been encouraged since Brexit happened to go more into environmental schemes, and added to that, the supermarkets have made that happen even quicker because they've been choosing the cheaper imports, which have had the luxury of no checks, where we had checks for exports for 3.5 years until today. But the weather over the last 6 months has been absolutely cataclysmic for British farming. On this farm, we will not be having a harvest this summer for the first time ever, and we are not alone in this reality. So the fact that the government have decided to implement these checks now means that they are actually deciding to deliver a food crisis, which will build over the next few months unless somebody manages to get rid of the friction between us and Europe. Since Brexit, we've become to rely on Europe more and more for food imports. And to put these barriers in now, rather than the beginning 3.5 years ago, there's lots of things you can say, but the fact that they're bringing them in now means that we face all sorts of difficult problems. Sri Lanka did this a couple of years ago. They made some terrible decisions, and it culminated in a food crisis, hyperinflation, and an IMF bailout. And it certainly looks to me as if Britain is headed in exactly that same direction.
I was at one of the...
January this year, the government began phasing in new rules for all imports of animal and plant products from the EU. Medium and high-risk goods now require health certificates, which in the case of animal products need to be signed off by a vet to show they meet UK standards, which are currently the same as EU standards. And from Tuesday, they will begin to check documents at the border and carry out physical inspections. The government says all these processes will add £330 million a year to the cost of imports. But independent expert analysis for ITV News estimates the cost will be almost 10 times higher. And if all these costs are passed on to consumers, they'll add almost £9 a month to the average household food shop. The three customs and border professionals who've carried out this analysis wish to remain anonymous. All three are experienced and have advised wholesalers, supermarkets and the government on the impact of Brexit. They insist their calculations are conservative and do not include the cost of the safety and security declarations that hauliers will need to make at the border from the autumn. The new rules are a bigger problem for smaller importers because the customs fees are largely fixed per consignment. Supermarkets fill lorries with food, smaller importers fill pallets. As a result, they end up paying more in charges per item. We showed our analysis to this customs expert who described it as robust.
These numbers are estimates, of course, but they do seem to be based on fairly moderate assumptions. There's a tendency generally, if there are additional costs, they are passed down to the final consumer. And we've seen that time after time again.
The government has delayed full border checks 5 times since Brexit. 2 years ago, Jacob Rees-Mogg explained that doing so protected consumers from higher food prices. Labour has ruled out rejoining the EU's single market and its customs union if it wins the next election, but says it will seek a veterinary agreement with the EU, which could reduce the red tape in both directions.
The bottom line is none of this needs to happen. Nothing in Brexit means that we have to charge people these silly amounts of money to bring food into our country. This government has chosen to do it. It's chosen to pay for its own mistakes and how it negotiated by making consumers pay more for their food and causing shortages.
And on GB News this week, Robert Jenrick, who's now no longer in the cabinet, actually disclosed what the Conservatives and their Brexit is doing to the British economy and productivity, which is more or less what Patrick Minford, the economist of Brexit, said would happen.
We've got low productivity growth and an economy which has been in recession for almost the last 2 years from a GDP per capita perspective.
At this wholesaler in northeast London, they're preparing orders for customers. Sending food out isn't the problem here, it's getting food in. New post-Brexit border controls are impacting choice, availability and prices. These shelves are completely empty.
This is a massive problem for us because we don't have anything to sell.
A few months ago, they used to import 27 varieties of German sausages. Now they're down to 5. Deliveries have become tangled up in red tape and customs charges.
You said a packet of your best-selling sausages costs £7.50.
If you factored in all the costs you face because of the extra paperwork, how much would that retail price be today?
We think at the moment around £10.
That's quite a big
That's
increase,
a 25% increase, yeah.
Is that what you're going to have to do to your prices?
Not all the prices, but some of them.
The government says it did a rigorous assessment of the cost of the new border checks, but refused to share it with us. It insists the checks are fundamental to protecting the UK's food supply chain against diseases and that they will have a minimal impact on food prices, with just a 0.2% increase over the next 3 years.
I think we've got some sensible plans. I think they're proportionate checks. They're also important, by the way, because British producers of goods, particularly our fantastic agricultural sector, face those sorts of checks when they export, and it's important we have a level playing field.
Before the referendum, some argued Brexit would make food cheaper, but a quarter of everything we eat is imported from the EU, and it's about to become more expensive. How much so will depend on how much of their costs businesses pass on.
Here we have it. Brexit reality is here, and there's still an awful lot more damage for Brexit to do. We don't know what is going to happen this week with the local elections, whether Rishi Sunak will be ousted and they'll try and bring in an interim leader and force us to an election, or whether we'll end up with an election in the autumn or even as far back as next January. Let's hope the election comes soon, because we really do need some people in power who are serious and focused on wanting to avert the worst of the crises that this Conservative Brexit government have ensured. Thanks for watching the film, and do comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button, or whatever it's called, so that when I get round to posting, you will know that I've posted.